Huples Cat. Hope you're having a great day. Welcome to my lecture 2 of the lecture series from When Everything Fails from Great Courses. It's a really fabulous series. I'm really glad I got it. I'm really glad I'm able to bring it to you. That's quite nice. The series appears to be aimed at the very interested but not altogether involved individual. I think for preppers, I think it's really useful to investigate basic stuff. I know I have found stuff during this course that I have learned and did not know, and I would like to do a follow-up when we finish this series where we actually have a discussion, and maybe I'll try and figure out a live stream it finally, and we can have a discussion about what parts of the When Everything Failed series was news to you and you're glad you heard. So he is going to use the American Red Cross as an example of a non-government organisation that is actually credentialed and is actually part of the official response to disasters in the United States of America. The Red Cross is actually a worldwide phenomenon. In fact, this is Red Crescent as well in Muslim areas. But what I would like to point out to you is that the variation response is different. For example, in Canada, the Canadian Red Cross will not offer anywhere near as much information or training as the American Red Cross does.
The American Red Cross often assists with providing shelters to persons who have been displaced from their homes.
I have collected some information that's supplementary, and it's just information that I took from the web and used links below as well, and it's available here if you actually want to delve further into the specific sort of information that the American Red Cross does offer. And this is merely a suggestion of the stuff they offer. They offer quite a bit of stuff, especially on disasters. In a biological or chemical emergency, and or if you have to take in refugees, the stuff on sheltering is pretty quick to read, and it's actually somewhat interesting. It'll tell you about how to space people out and a lot of other things and how to feed them safely. It's actually worth a look at.
And also in providing food and water to responders who are working for long periods of time at the scene of an incident. To get technical for a moment, each jurisdiction has an emergency operations plan that's organized into a series of emergency support functions, or ESFs.
This is a really useful way to examine your emergency plans. You have emergency plans, right? Of course, some of the ESFs are going to be non-applicable to you as an individual. However, others are really useful, like, for example, how are you going to fight fires, home fires or wildfires after an EMP event? Who's going to fight the fire? How are they going to do it? Are they able to pump water or move water? The local, regional and national leaders are going to have, in a lot of major ongoing disasters, huge power.
During a disaster, the incident commander and Emergency Operations Center personnel would refer to the principles outlined in relevant ESFs to help frame their responses. Emergency Support Function number 6 is titled Mass Care, Emergency Assistance, Temporary Housing, and Human Services. Across the country, plan after plan includes the American Red Cross as a supporting agency on this ESF because of that organization's recognized ability to establish shelter operations.
I'm not a Christian, I don't believe in religion, but the churches often are great for disaster relief and do it all the time. Sikhs do it, I know that, Hindus do it, Jewish people do it, there's a whole bunch of religions do formalize disaster relief, mostly sheltering and feeding, and also counselling, not on a religious basis but on an emotional psychological basis in disasters. So if you're religious, maybe ask your church, if you haven't already, what do we do if there's a disaster in the area? Do we have any formalized response plans? And if we don't, does another church in the area have it? It's a good idea. Churches are very much a local network, and local networking is the best way to prove yourself in an SHTF disaster.
Spontaneous volunteers, on the other hand, are well-meaning and may have services to offer, but they're not always included in a formal sense within disaster operations. They're not included within emergency operations plans. They haven't exercised and trained alongside other responders, and they may not have been formally vetted or credentialed. They may still have a critical role to play in some incidents. So let's come back to that question, how can I help? If you find that you have a passion for volunteer work and assisting during disasters, one very straightforward approach is to affiliate with a recognized NVOAD. Of course, it's important to do so before a disaster strikes, so you can become familiar with the organization and receive training that they offer to prepare for any actual deployments.
Of course, CERT training in America is a natural and obvious choice, but do be aware that you may find yourself involuntarily redeployed in a mega disaster. So that's something I would advise caution with. You might not necessarily want to be very, very publicly exposed in who you exactly are and where exactly you are if you do formalized CERT training, because in a mega disaster, a real major disaster, you might not want to be redeployed, but they might redeploy you anyway.
It's also important to acknowledge that affiliating with a recognized NVOAD or other disaster response group implies a commitment to respond. Likely not to every incident, of course, but to be willing, even at odd hours, and perhaps outside of your own community, to go where services are needed.
Now this has obvious negatives for most preppers, but the training and workload involved might actually appeal to you, and why not, if that was what you want to do?
You may wish to see if your profession has opportunities for volunteer work in disaster.
As a registered nurse, Kitty and myself can easily do volunteer work and actually paid work in most disasters around the world. Although recently retired, we've both kept up our registrations and professional obligations for the time being. However, we are not going to Poland. So our registered nurse credentials in Canada remain active and available. This is actually from the RNAO. You can only get them from the RNAO in Canada, in Ontario. So if you see this in Ontario on somebody you know that are a registered nurse. When the organization's focus is on medicine, I would avoid them.
Across the nation, for instance, medical reserve corps bring together medical professionals who can provide a variety of services in a disaster.
Nursing is the historic and current leader in almost everything to do with community response and disaster. Whilst doctors and social workers seem to feel that they're the specialists in disaster response, and even ambulance drivers, they're really not. The actual ongoing response that disasters require is very, very much a nursing issue.
There are also teams, again associated with the Department of Health and Human Services, focused on animal care. That's the National Veterinary Response Teams.
In a major disaster, you might find that there's major opportunities for dog massage for you to do in Canada. My dog always needs a good rub. Seriously, as a vegan and a humanist, I actually kind of really love this guy's focus on pet and wildlife and animal help in disasters. It's often overlooked, it really never should be. Sentient creatures, whether they're human or dog, really do require a good rub.
Laypersons may also participate on a local community emergency response team, or a CERT.
If you are an American. Of note, he actually fails to mention hobbies. Potholing or cave diving or mountain climbing are examples of hobbies that if you're very proficient at, can easily be translated into rescue services.
Not all communities have these, but those that do have found them to provide valuable assistance both at emergency situations and during planned events. CERT volunteers receive training on a variety of first response, fire, search and rescue, and medical operations, and don't presume any professional training in these fields.
This seems to me to be almost ideal networking for a prepper.
If you can help safely, that's one thing, but you don't want to become an additional casualty for first responders to address while they're trying to resolve an already challenging situation.
Do you carry a fire extinguisher and a first aid kit in your vehicle? If you don't, why not? You're not a prepper then, are you? Can you cut seatbelts? Can you smash windows of vehicles easily? If you can't, then you're not a prepper. These are all great things to have in any local or massive disaster in your vehicle. And if you don't have them in your vehicle, all your vehicles, go and get some. There is definitely crossover between local accidents, regional major disasters, and a global calamity in terms of how you prep.
Once first responders are already on the scene of an incident, already addressing the incident, the general rule for volunteers, and other first responders for that matter, is don't come unless you're invited. Appearing at a scene without having been dispatched or asked to assist is known as self-deployment, and with few exceptions, it's generally frowned upon.
Generally speaking, self-deployment into a scene is never a great idea. If you deploy nearby and hang out and then try and find out from the official responders if they actually need your services, and if so how, might be a good idea, providing you don't cause blockage of roads or additional casualties.
If you do go to the scene of an incident, there are some ground rules that everyone is expected to follow. Because it bears repeating, don't self-deploy to a scene where responders are working. Only go if you or your organization have been requested or if there's been a call for volunteers. Don't go without telling someone, family, a trusted friend, or anyone who might need to contact you, where you're going, how you can be reached, and what vehicle you're taking, and so on. Don't go directly to the site of the incident. Be sure to find out where check-in, also called staging, is located. If you're assigned that task, be sure you understand that task, know who your supervisor is, and know how to contact him or her. If you don't feel qualified or prepared to do that task, be honest about that.
There is nothing wrong and everything right with actually admitting I'm not competent to do this task. It can be very, very harmful if you're in denial about your competency level. I'm Huples' cat. Wolfie Terrier is very, very hungry. Wolfie desperately would like to have more food than he's getting. He needs more food. If you can care about Wolfie, please send him money to me and I'll make sure that Wolfie gets adequate snacks and adequate nutrition. Please help a little dog in Ontario. He's suffering dreadfully and it's all the Russians' fault. Stay happy, stay calm, have a great week. Toodles. This has been a Massaging a Terrier Productions 2022.